The train screeched into Silver Creek Station on a Tuesday morning in late June, belching black smoke into the Montana sky like a dying beast. Rose Ashford pressed her gloved hand against the window of the last passenger car, watching the town materialize through the soot-stained glass. Wooden buildings lined a single dirt road. A church steeple pointed toward heaven like an accusation. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still white with summer snow. She had traveled 6 days from Boston with nothing but a small leather valise and a lie. The conductor called out the station name, his voice hoarse from 1,000 identical announcements. Rose stood smoothing the wrinkles from her gray traveling dress. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, carefully mended in places where the original owner had torn it. She had bought the dress from a second-hand shop 3 blocks from the boarding house where she had spent her last night as a free woman. The dress smelled faintly of lavender and someone else's sorrow. She descended the metal steps carefully, one hand gripping the railing, the other clutching her valise. The platform was nearly empty. A freight worker rolled barrels toward a waiting wagon. An elderly woman in black sat on a bench, her face hidden beneath a mourning veil. And at the far end of the platform, standing perfectly still in the morning light, was the man who had purchased her future with a single advertisement in the Boston Herald. Samuel Hartwell. She recognized him from the photograph he had sent, though the image had not captured the full measure of the man. He stood well over 6 feet tall, shoulders broad beneath a perfectly tailored black coat. His hair was dark, swept back from a high forehead. Clean-shaven face, strong jaw, eyes the color of slate. He held a black hat in one hand and a bouquet of white roses in the other. He looked like a gentleman. He looked like salvation. Rose forced her feet to move forward. Samuel smiled as she approached, a smile that revealed even white teeth and created pleasant lines around his eyes. He extended the flowers. "Miss Ashford," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, nothing like the rough miners and cowboys she had imagined populated this frontier town. "I hope your journey was not too arduous." "It was bearable, Mr. Hartwell." She took the roses. Their stems were wrapped in white silk ribbon. She wondered how much they had cost. She wondered how long she would have to pay for them. "Please call me Samuel." He gestured toward a black carriage waiting on the street beyond the platform. "I have made arrangements for your comfort. I thought you might wish to rest before we discuss the particulars of our arrangement." Our arrangement. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. She followed him to the carriage. The seats were upholstered in deep red velvet. The horse that pulled it was a glossy chestnut mare, well-fed, well-groomed. Everything about Samuel Hartwell spoke of money, of power, of a man who was accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. He helped her into the carriage, his hand firm on her elbow. The touch lasted a fraction longer than necessary. Rose felt something cold move through her chest, a whisper of warning that she pushed down, down, down into the place where she kept all the things she could not afford to feel. The carriage rolled through Silver Creek's main street. Samuel pointed out landmarks with the pride of ownership. The Silver Star Saloon, 3 stories of polished wood and brass fixtures, the largest establishment in town. That was his. The mining company office where fortunes were won and lost every Friday when the silver was weighed. He owned shares. The bank, the general store, the hotel with the red awning. He had financial interest in all of them. "You will want for nothing here," Samuel said, watching her face. "I have built something significant in this town, Miss Ashford. A man of my position requires a wife who can appreciate what that means." "I understand," Rose said quietly. "Do you—" He leaned forward slightly. "Forgive my directness, but your letter of response was rather vague about your circumstances in Boston. A young woman of good breeding does not typically travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger without compelling reason." Rose had prepared for this question during the long train journey. She had rehearsed the lie until it felt almost like truth. "My father passed away 6 months ago," she said, keeping her voice steady. "He left debts. There was nothing remaining of the family estate. I had limited options for respectable employment. When I saw your advertisement, I thought it might offer a fresh beginning." Most of that was true. Her father, Thomas Ashford, had indeed died 6 months ago. What she did not mention was that he had died by his own hand, a rope around his neck in a rented room in the worst part of Boston. She did not mention that he had embezzled money from the church charity fund, money meant to feed widows and orphans. She did not mention that when his crime was discovered, her father had written a brief note apologizing to no one and hanged himself rather than face prosecution. She did not mention that the shame had followed her like a shadow, that women crossed the street to avoid her, that former friends turned their backs, that the landlord had given her 3 days to vacate the rooms where she had lived her entire life. She did not mention that she had changed her first name from Rebecca to Rose, that she had burned every document connecting her to Thomas Ashford, that she had fled Boston like a criminal in the night. Samuel studied her face for a long moment, his gray eyes calculating. Then he smiled again and settled back against the velvet cushions. "A fresh beginning," he said. "Yes, I can appreciate that. We are alike in that regard, you and I. The past is irrelevant. Only the future matters." The carriage turned onto a tree-lined street where the houses sat back from the road, surrounded by white picket fences and manicured gardens. Samuel's house was the largest, a 2-story structure painted pale yellow with green shutters and a wraparound porch. Window boxes overflowed with geraniums. A brass plaque beside the front door read, "Hartwell House," in elegant script. "Home," Samuel said with satisfaction. A housekeeper waited at the door, a thin woman in her 50s with suspicious eyes. Samuel introduced her as Mrs. Kohler. She did not smile. She took Rose's valise and led her upstairs to a bedroom that was larger than the entire apartment Rose had shared with her father in Boston. A 4-poster bed dominated the room, draped in white lace. A wardrobe stood against one wall. A vanity with a silver mirror occupied the space beneath the window. Everything was pristine, untouched, waiting. "You have 1 hour to refresh yourself," Mrs. Kohler said. "Mr. Hartwell expects you downstairs for lunch at noon. Do not be late. He does not tolerate tardiness." Then she left, closing the door with a decisive click. Rose set the white roses on the vanity and stared at her reflection in the silver mirror. A pale face looked back, dark circles beneath brown eyes, hair coming loose from its pins. She looked like a ghost. She looked like someone who had already died. She thought about her father's last words written in shaking handwriting on a scrap of paper she had found beside his body. "I am sorry. I was weak. Forgive me." But she had not forgiven him. She had hated him for leaving her alone, for destroying the life they had built, for taking the coward's way out and leaving her to face the consequences. And now, here she was in a stranger's house, wearing a dead woman's dress, about to marry a man she did not know because she had nowhere else to go. Rose unpacked her valise. She owned very little. 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small leather-bound book that had belonged to her mother. She ran her fingers over the book's cover. It was a journal, mostly empty. Her mother had died when Rose was born, and her father had kept the journal as a memento. Rose had never written in it. It had always felt too sacred, too fragile to touch. But now, standing in this beautiful bedroom in this beautiful house that felt nothing like home, Rose opened the journal to the first blank page. She found a pen in the vanity drawer, and in small, careful handwriting she wrote a single sentence. June 24th, 1887. My name is Rose Ashford. If anyone finds this after I am gone, please know I tried. She closed the book and hid it at the bottom of her valise beneath the folded nightgowns. Downstairs, Samuel waited in the dining room. The table was set with china and crystal. Cold roast chicken, fresh bread, butter, jam, sliced tomatoes from the garden. More food than Rose had seen in weeks. Samuel held out a chair for her. His hand brushed her shoulder as she sat. It was not quite an accident. They ate in near silence. Samuel asked polite questions about her journey. She gave polite answers. He refilled her water glass before she had to ask. He complimented her appearance. He was the perfect gentleman. But Rose noticed small things. The way his jaw tightened when she reached for the salt before he could pass it to her. The way his eyes followed her hands when she cut her chicken. The way he sat very still like a predator watching prey. After lunch, Samuel led her into his study. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, a massive desk cluttered with papers. He poured 2 glasses of brandy and handed one to her. "I believe in transparency," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I want you to understand what I expect from this union." Rose held her glass but did not drink. "You will manage my household. You will accompany me to social functions. You will present yourself as a woman of refinement and good character. You will not embarrass me in public. You will not question my business dealings. You will not leave this house without my knowledge. You will be in all respects the perfect wife." Each word landed like a stone. "In return," Samuel continued, "you will want for nothing. You will have fine clothes, good food, a comfortable home. You will have my protection. And you will have the social standing that comes with being Mrs. Samuel Hartwell." He drained his brandy and set the glass down with a sharp click. "Do you understand the terms?" Rose looked at him. Really looked at him. At the handsome face that revealed nothing. At the expensive clothes that spoke of wealth. At the eyes that were calculating the exact value of her compliance. She thought about the train she had just left. She thought about the 73 cents remaining in her small purse. She thought about the alternative, which was sleeping on park benches and begging for work that no one would give a woman tainted by scandal. "I understand," she said. "Good." Samuel smiled. "The minister will perform the ceremony in 3 days. That will give Mrs. Kohler time to prepare the house for guests. I have already purchased your wedding dress. It is being altered at the dressmaker's shop. You need only show up and say the words." 3 days. Rose's hands tightened around the glass of brandy. "Is there a church in town?" she asked, searching for any detail that might feel normal, might feel safe. "A small one. We will be married there. Nothing elaborate. I prefer discretion in personal matters." "Will there be many guests?" Samuel's expression flickered just for a moment. Something dark moved behind his eyes and was gone. "No guests on your side, obviously. A few business associates on mine. As I said, I prefer discretion." Rose nodded. She understood. A small wedding meant fewer witnesses, fewer questions, fewer people who might wonder why Samuel Hartwell was marrying a woman nobody had ever met. That evening, Mrs. Kohler showed Rose to a different bedroom at the end of the upstairs hallway. Smaller than the first room, but still comfortable. A single bed, a small desk, a window overlooking the back garden. "This will be your room until the wedding," Mrs. Kohler said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "After that, you will move to the master bedroom with Mr. Hartwell. I trust you understand what is expected." Rose did not answer. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. A seamstress came to the house to fit the wedding dress, a beautiful white silk gown with lace sleeves and pearl buttons. Rose stood silent while the woman pinned and tucked and murmured about what a lucky bride she was. Samuel came and went at odd hours, always impeccably dressed, always perfectly polite, always watching her with those calculating gray eyes. Rose was not allowed to leave the house. When she asked if she might visit the town, perhaps see the general store, Samuel smiled and said, "After the wedding, my dear. For now I want you to rest and prepare yourself. A bride should not be seen too much before her wedding day. It is unlucky." On the second day, Rose was sitting in the parlor attempting to read when a woman knocked at the front door. Mrs. Kohler answered, and Rose heard low voices in the entrance hall. A moment later, a woman in her 60s appeared in the parlor doorway. She was small white-haired with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. She carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "You must be Rose," the woman said, smiling. "I am Martha Brennan. I own the fabric shop in town. I heard Samuel was getting married and thought I would bring a welcoming gift." She set the basket on the table and pulled back the cloth, revealing fresh baked bread, a jar of blackberry jam, and a small bouquet of wildflowers. "That is very kind of you," Rose said, standing. Something about Martha's open, honest face made her want to cry. "Nonsense. We women must look after each other in this town." Martha's smile faded slightly. "Especially when we marry men who are not well known to us." There was something in the way she said it, a warning wrapped in kindness. Mrs. Kohler appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Hartwell does not allow visitors without his permission." "Oh, I am certain Samuel won't mind a neighborly welcome." Martha turned back to Rose. "If you ever need anything, dear, my shop is on Main Street, the blue building with the white trim. You come see me any time." She squeezed Rose's hand once quickly, and then she was gone. Rose stared at the wildflowers for a long time after Martha left. They were simple flowers, nothing like the expensive white roses Samuel had given her. But they felt real. They felt like hope. The wedding took place on a Thursday morning. The church was small and nearly empty, just as Samuel had promised. A handful of men in expensive suits sat in the front pews. No women. No one smiled. The minister rushed through the ceremony as if he had somewhere more important to be. Rose wore the white silk dress and carried a bouquet of white roses. She spoke the words when prompted. "I do." She signed her name in the church register. Rebecca Rose Ashford Hartwell. The ink was still wet when Samuel took her arm and led her back down the aisle. They returned to Hartwell House for a brief reception. The men drank whiskey and talked about silver prices. Rose stood beside Samuel and smiled when appropriate. One of the men, a lawyer named Morrison, raised his glass in a toast. "To Samuel and his lovely bride, may you have many happy years together." The men drank. Samuel's hand tightened on Rose's waist, his fingers digging in just hard enough to hurt through the layers of silk and corset. "Thank you all for coming," Samuel said. "My wife and I will be retiring now. Business will resume as usual tomorrow." The men filed out. Mrs. Kohler cleared the glasses. And then it was just Rose and Samuel standing alone in the parlor of the house that was now her cage. Samuel turned to her. The mask of the perfect gentleman slipped just for a moment, and Rose saw what lived beneath. Something cold and hungry and utterly without mercy. "Upstairs," he said quietly. "It is time you learned what it means to be my wife." Rose's heart hammered in her chest. She thought about running. She thought about screaming, but there was nowhere to run to and no one who would hear. She followed him upstairs. The master bedroom was larger than any room Rose had ever seen. A massive bed dominated the space, draped in dark blue velvet. Heavy curtains blocked most of the sunlight. The air smelled of sandalwood and something darker, something Rose could not name. Samuel closed the door and locked it. The click of the lock seemed to echo forever. "Take off the dress," he said. Rose's hands shook as she reached for the pearl buttons at her throat. She fumbled with them, her fingers clumsy with fear. "Faster!" She worked faster, but her hands would not cooperate. A button slipped from her grasp and she had to start over. Samuel crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed the front of the dress and pulled. Fabric tore. Pearls scattered across the hardwood floor like tiny tears. "When I give you an instruction," Samuel said, his face inches from hers, "you obey immediately. Do you understand?" Rose nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Say it." "I understand." "Good." He released her and stepped back. "Now finish undressing." Rose's fingers found the rest of the buttons. The ruined dress fell away. She stood in her undergarments, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. Samuel circled her slowly like a buyer examining livestock at market. He stopped behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders. His grip was firm, possessive. "You are mine now," he whispered in her ear. "I paid for you. Your train ticket, your dress, this house, everything you see. I own all of it, including you. There is no one coming to save you. There is nowhere for you to go. You belong to me." His right hand moved from her shoulder to her throat. Not squeezing, not yet, just resting there. A promise. "If you obey, we will get along fine. If you disobey, you will learn that I do not tolerate defiance. Not from anyone, certainly not from a woman whose father was a thief and a coward." Rose's blood turned to ice. "How did you know about my father?" Samuel laughed, a sound without humor. "Did you think I would agree to marry a stranger without investigating her background? I know everything about you, Rose. I know your father embezzled from a church charity. I know he hanged himself rather than face justice. I know you fled Boston under a false name. I know you have nothing and no one." He turned her around to face him. His gray eyes were flat empty, the eyes of a shark. "That is why I chose you. No family, no friends, no past, no one who will ask questions. You are perfect." He kissed her then, hard and brutal, his teeth cutting her lip. Rose tasted blood. When he pulled away, he smiled at the red smear on her mouth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartwell." That night, lying in the dark beside the man who now owned her, Rose touched her split lip and thought about her father's final words. "I am sorry. I was weak." She understood weakness now. She understood how easy it would be to simply give up, to let the darkness swallow everything, to choose the rope or the river or the pills. But something small and fierce burned in her chest, something that refused to die. She would not be her father. She would not give Samuel Hartwell the satisfaction of breaking her completely. She would survive, and if she was very lucky, very careful, very patient, she would find a way to make him pay for every cruelty, every bruise, every moment of fear. In the darkness, Rose's fingers curled into fists, and deep in her mind, in the place where she kept all her secrets, she began to make a list. The sun rose over Silver Creek like an accusation. Rose woke to find Samuel already gone from the bed, the sheets on his side pulled tight and tucked with military precision. She lay still for a long moment, cataloging the damage. Her lip was swollen where his teeth had broken skin. Her wrists bore finger-shaped bruises, dark purple against pale skin. Between her legs a dull ache that made movement difficult. She pushed herself upright slowly, testing each limb. Nothing broken. That was something. The door opened without warning. Mrs. Kohler entered carrying a breakfast tray, her face carefully blank. She set the tray on the bedside table without looking at Rose. "Mr. Hartwell has gone to the saloon. He expects you dressed and downstairs by 9 o'clock. You are to begin learning the household routine today." "What time is it now?" Rose's voice came out rough, unused. 7:30. I suggest you hurry." Mrs. Kohler turned to leave, then paused at the door. For a brief moment something flickered across her weathered face. Pity, perhaps, or recognition. "The powder is in the vanity drawer, second from the top. It will cover the marks mostly." Then she was gone. Rose found the powder where Mrs. Kohler had indicated. Face powder, expensive, in a crystal container with a silver lid. She applied it carefully, watching her reflection transform in the mirror. The bruise on her jaw faded to a shadow. The split lip remained visible, but less shocking. She looked like a woman who had simply been clumsy, who had walked into a door or tripped on the stairs. She looked like a liar. The breakfast on the tray was elaborate. Soft boiled eggs toast with butter, sliced peaches, fresh cream. Rose's stomach turned at the sight. She forced herself to eat anyway. She would need her strength. Mrs. Kohler spent the morning teaching Rose the household schedule with grim efficiency. Breakfast at 7. Samuel left for the saloon by 8. Rose was to spend the morning overseeing the cleaning, though Mrs. Kohler made it clear she had been managing the house perfectly well without help. Lunch at noon, which Rose would eat alone unless Samuel decided to come home. Afternoons were for mending correspondence or whatever tasks Samuel assigned. Dinner at 6 sharp, no exceptions. Samuel expected his wife presentable and waiting when he returned each evening. "Mr. Hartwell does not tolerate disorder," Mrs. Kohler said, running her finger along a windowsill and checking for dust. "Everything in this house has its place. You would do well to remember that." "Including me," Rose said quietly. Mrs. Kohler's hand stilled. She looked at Rose for a long moment, and in that look, Rose saw the answer to a question she had not yet asked. Mrs. Kohler had seen this before. She knew exactly what Samuel Hartwell was. "Especially you," Mrs. Kohler said finally, and continued her inspection. The days fell into a pattern. Samuel left early and returned late, often smelling of whiskey and cigar smoke. Sometimes he ignored Rose completely, eating his dinner in silence before retreating to his study. Those nights were better. Other nights he was attentive in ways that made Rose's skin crawl. He would ask about her day, compliment her dress, take her hand across the dinner table. And then later upstairs he would transform into something else entirely. The bruises accumulated slowly. a red mark on her upper arm where he had gripped too hard, a handprint on her thigh, a cut on her scalp hidden beneath her hair where he had pulled so hard a clump came loose in his fist. Each time he had a reason. She had looked at him wrong. She had spoken out of turn. She had failed to anticipate his needs. She was ungrateful. She was stupid. She was lucky to have him. Each time he apologized afterward, he would hold her, stroke her hair, whisper that he loved her too much, that his passion overwhelmed him, that she made him lose control. He would buy her gifts the next day, a new dress, a pair of earrings, a book of poetry she had no interest in reading. The gifts felt like payments, like transactions, like proof that she had sold herself and now the debt was being collected in installments of pain. 2 weeks after the wedding, Rose finally gathered the courage to leave the house. Samuel had given permission grudgingly for her to visit the general store. Mrs. Kohler needed thread for mending, and Samuel wanted his wife to be seen in town to confirm his status as a married man of means. "You will go directly to the store and return within 1 hour," Samuel said over breakfast. "You will speak to no one beyond what is necessary for your purchase. You will not loiter. You will not gossip. Is that understood?" "Yes, Samuel." "And Rose?" He set down his coffee cup and looked at her with those flat gray eyes. "If I hear that you spoke to any man other than the shopkeeper, you will regret it. Do you understand what I mean?" She understood perfectly. The walk to town took 15 minutes. Rose moved slowly, savoring the feeling of sunlight on her face, the breeze that lifted the edges of her shawl. For the first time in 2 weeks, she could breathe without feeling watched. Main Street bustled with morning activity. Miners headed toward the hills, lunch pails in hand. Women swept porches and called to each other across gardens. A dog slept in a patch of sunlight outside the blacksmith's shop. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary, as if violence and cruelty did not exist here, as if women were not bleeding behind closed doors while the town went about its business. Rose found the general store sandwiched between the post office and a building with a sign reading, "Brennan's Fabrics and Notions, Martha's Shop." Rose remembered the kind woman who had brought wildflowers, who had squeezed her hand and told her to come visit any time. She almost turned toward Martha's door. Her feet carried her 2 steps in that direction before she stopped herself. Samuel would know. Somehow he would know, and whatever punishment he devised would be worse than the loneliness. She entered the general store instead. The shopkeeper was a man in his 50s, balding with spectacles that sat crooked on his nose. He smiled when Rose entered. "Mrs. Hartwell, good morning. What can I get for you today?" The name still sounded foreign to Rose's ears. Mrs. Hartwell. A stranger's name attached to a stranger's life. "Thread, please, white and black, 2 spools of each." While the shopkeeper gathered her items, Rose wandered between the shelves. Canned goods, flour sacks, tools, bolts of fabric. Her eyes landed on a display near the back. Writing supplies, pens, ink bottles, and stacks of blank journals. Her mother's journal was nearly full now. Rose had been writing in it every night after Samuel fell asleep. Brief entries coded phrases, dates, and times. Nothing explicit. Nothing Samuel would understand if he found it. But Rose knew what each entry meant. Each abbreviation was a bruise. Each date was a violation. She was building a record, though she did not yet know what she would do with it. She needed more pages. "Anything else, Mrs. Hartwell?" Rose picked up one of the journals, small leather bound with cream-colored pages. It would fit easily in her sewing basket, hidden among the spools and scraps. "This as well, please." The shopkeeper wrapped her purchases in brown paper and tied the bundle with string. Rose paid with coins from the household account. Samuel had grudgingly established money she was allowed to spend on necessities and nothing more. She was turning to leave when a man entered the store. Tall, perhaps 30, with sun-darkened skin and pale eyes that seemed to see too much. He wore dusty traveling clothes and a gun belt that hung low on his hips. A stranger. Silver Creek saw plenty of drifters passing through on their way to the mines or the next town. But this man was different. He moved with purpose, with awareness, his eyes sweeping the store in a way that suggested he was looking for something specific. His gaze landed on Rose. For a moment neither of them moved. Rose saw him take in the powder-caked makeup, the stiff way she held herself, the package clutched against her chest like armor. She saw recognition flash across his face. Not recognition of her specifically, but recognition of what she was. He had seen this before. He knew. The moment stretched and broke. The man touched the brim of his hat and moved toward the counter. Rose fled. She walked home quickly, her heart pounding, Samuel's warning echoing in her mind. Do not speak to any man. But she had not spoken. She had only looked. Surely that was not forbidden. Surely that was not something Samuel would punish her for. But when she arrived home, Samuel was waiting in the parlor. He should have been at the saloon. He was never home at this hour. You were gone 57 minutes, he said without preamble. I gave you 1 hour. You returned early. Why? Rose set the package on the hall table, her hands shaking. I completed my errand. There was no reason to linger. Mrs. Patterson saw you in the general store. She said a man came in while you were there. A stranger. The words hit Rose like a fist. Mrs. Patterson. A woman she had never met, reporting her movements like a spy. I did not speak to him, Rose said carefully. I was leaving as he entered. Samuel stood and crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed Rose's chin, forcing her face up, his fingers digging into the bruise he had left 2 days ago. The pain made her eyes water. Did he look at you? I don't know. I was not paying attention. Liar. Samuel's grip tightened. Did he look at you? Rose made a decision. The truth would hurt less than being caught in a lie later. Yes, briefly. Then I left. Samuel released her chin and stepped back. For a moment Rose thought she had escaped. Then his hand came up and struck her across the face, open-palmed hard enough to snap her head sideways. The room spun. Rose tasted copper. She pressed her hand to her cheek, feeling the heat bloom under her palm. You are my wife, Samuel said, his voice deadly calm. My property. When another man looks at you, he is looking at something that belongs to me. And when you allow it, when you stand there and let his eyes touch what is mine, you insult me. Do you understand? Rose nodded, not trusting her voice. Say it. I understand. Good. Samuel adjusted his cuffs, smoothed his hair, transformed back into the gentleman. Go upstairs and fix your face. We are having dinner with the mayor tonight. You will wear the blue dress and the pearl earrings. You will smile. You will be charming. And if I see one mark on you when you come downstairs, if I see any evidence that you have been clumsy or careless or disobedient, then after our guests leave, you will learn what real punishment feels like. He walked past her toward his study, pausing at the door. Oh, and Rose, I took the liberty of opening your package. Thread and a journal. How industrious of you. What exactly do you plan to write in that journal? Rose's blood turned to ice. He had found it. He had opened her purchase and seen the blank pages. Household accounts. She said, her voice steady, despite the terror clawing at her throat. Mrs. Kohler suggested I keep track of expenditures. For the budget. Samuel studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled. Of course. How sensible. Though I should mention I will be reviewing your accounts regularly. I would hate for there to be any discrepancies, any secrets. He emphasized the last word, watching her reaction. I do not tolerate secrets in my house. He closed the study door. Rose stood alone in the hallway, her cheek throbbing, her mind racing. He suspected something. He did not know what, not yet, but he suspected. She would have to be more careful. So much more careful. That night Rose wore the blue dress and the pearl earrings. She sat beside Samuel at dinner with the mayor, and his wife smiled when appropriate, laughed at jokes that were not funny, played the role of the devoted newlywed. The mayor's wife complimented her earrings. Rose thanked her graciously. No one mentioned the faint discoloration on her cheekbone that the powder could not quite hide. After the guests left, Samuel sent Rose upstairs without a word. She waited in the master bedroom, bracing for whatever came next. But Samuel did not come upstairs. She heard him moving around on the first floor, the clink of glass, the sound of liquid being poured. Drinking. An hour passed. 2. Finally Rose heard his footsteps on the stairs. Slow, uneven. He was drunk. Drunk Samuel was unpredictable. Sometimes alcohol made him maudlin, weeping about his difficult childhood, his absent father, his need for control. Other times it made him cruel. The door opened. Samuel swayed slightly, holding a glass of whiskey. He looked at Rose for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Come here," he said. Rose stood and crossed the room. Samuel set down his glass and took her hands in his. He stared at her fingers, tracing the lines on her palms. "Do you know what I did before I came to Silver Creek?" he asked quietly. "No. I was nothing. A clerk in a Denver bank. I counted other men's money and dreamed of having my own. When the silver strike happened here, I saw an opportunity. I borrowed money, bought the saloon, made investments. Built everything you see. Everything." He looked up at her, his eyes glassy with alcohol and something darker. "Men respect me now, fear me. I made myself into someone who matters, and I will not let anyone threaten what I have built. Not the miners who complain about wages, not the investors who question my decisions, and certainly not a wife who might think she has rights opinions agency." He released her hands and picked up his glass, draining it. "You are a symbol, Rose. Evidence of my success. A beautiful thing I own, displayed for others to envy. That is your purpose. Nothing more." He left the room, taking the glass with him. Rose heard him stumble down the hallway toward one of the guest bedrooms. She waited until his footsteps faded. Then she retrieved the new journal from where she had hidden it in her sewing basket. She opened to the first page and wrote in tiny, cramped letters. July 8, 1887. Struck across the face for being looked at by a stranger. Threatened with worse if evidence of abuse shown to guests. S. drinks heavily. Refers to me as property symbol thing he owns. Says I have no rights. She paused, pen hovering over paper. Then she added one more line. He is afraid of something. A man who has everything does not threaten this much unless he fears losing it. What is he hiding? Rose closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place, nestled among ordinary thread and fabric scraps invisible to anyone who did not know to look. The bruise on her cheek throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat, but her hands, for the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, did not shake. The man with pale eyes arrived in Silver Creek on a Monday morning in mid-July, when the heat sat heavy on the town like a wool blanket. Rose watched from the parlor window as he rode past Hartwell House on a dusty buckskin mare, his hat pulled low against the sun. She recognized him immediately, the stranger from the general store, the man whose brief glance had earned her a bruised cheek and a night of fear. He did not look at the house as he passed, but something about the way he sat, his horse alert and watchful, suggested he knew exactly where he was and who lived there. Rose let the curtain fall and stepped back from the window. Samuel had left an hour ago for the saloon, his mood foul after a restless night. He had not touched her, had barely spoken, had simply dressed and departed with the brittle tension of a man whose demons gave him no peace. Rose had learned to read these moods, to navigate the spaces between his rages. This morning's silence was a gift, even if it felt like the stillness before a storm. She spent the morning as she spent most mornings now, supervising Mrs. Kohler's cleaning, though the older woman needed no supervision, mending a tear in one of Samuel's shirts, writing coded entries in her journal. The entries were growing longer, more detailed, not just the physical abuses but patterns, the way Samuel's violence escalated after business meetings, the increased drinking on Fridays when the mine payroll was distributed, the names he mentioned in his sleep when nightmares clawed at him. She was building something. She did not yet know what, but she was building it nonetheless. At noon, Mrs. Kohler brought lunch on a tray. Cold chicken bread cheese. Simple fare, but Rose was grateful. The nausea that had plagued her for the past week had finally subsided. "Mrs. Kohler," Rose said as the woman turned to leave, "the man who rode past this morning, the stranger on the buckskin mare, have you seen him in town before?" Mrs. Kohler's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Wariness, perhaps. He arrived 3 days ago, took a room at the Silverwood Hotel, pays in advance, keeps to himself mostly. Name is Stone, Caleb Stone. What brings him to Silver Creek? Mrs. Kohler hesitated. For a moment Rose thought she would not answer. Then the older woman set down the tray and folded her hands in front of her apron. If you are asking whether Mr. Hartwell knows about him, the answer is yes. Mr. Hartwell knows about everyone who comes to this town. He makes it his business to know. But what does Mr. Stone want here? That Mrs. Hartwell is a question you should not be asking, and if you value your safety, you will not ask it again. Mrs. Kohler left, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt like a warning. Rose sat with her untouched lunch and thought about the name, Caleb Stone. It meant nothing to her, yet the way Mrs. Kohler had spoken suggested it should mean something, that it meant something to Samuel. She needed to know more. But more than that, she needed to be careful. Samuel was already suspicious, already watching her with increasing paranoia. She could not afford to give him real cause for alarm. The answer came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, Rose gathered her courage and walked to Martha Brennan's fabric shop. She had prepared her excuse carefully. She needed ribbon for a dress she was altering. Samuel could not object to such a domestic errand. It was expected proper within the bounds of her allowed activities. The shop was cool and dim after the bright street bolts of fabric stacked on shelves, ribbons and lace displayed in glass cases. The smell of new cloth and lavender sachets filled the air. Martha stood behind the counter sorting buttons into small wooden boxes. She looked up when the bell above the door chimed and smiled, genuine warmth flooding her weathered face. "Rose, my dear, I was hoping you would come." Something in Rose's chest loosened at the sound of her name spoken with kindness. She had not realized how starved she was for simple human warmth until this moment. "I need ribbon," Rose said, her voice catching slightly. "Blue if you have it." "Of course." Martha moved from behind the counter, studying Rose's face with eyes that saw too much. "That bruise on your cheek is fading nicely. The powder helps, but you should also use cool compresses in the evening. Reduces the swelling faster." Rose's hand flew to her cheek instinctively, though the bruise was nearly gone now, hidden under careful makeup. "I walked into a door," she said automatically. "Of course you did." Martha's tone was gentle but knowing. She pulled a bolt of blue ribbon from a drawer and began measuring. "Doors are so treacherous in this town. My daughter Emily walked into quite a few of them before she died." The words hung in the air like smoke. Rose stared at Martha, her mind racing. Emily. The name Martha had mentioned once before briefly during her first visit to Hartwell House. Martha's daughter who had married a wealthy man, who had died young. "I am sorry for your loss," Rose said carefully. Martha cut the ribbon with sharp scissors, the sound loud in the quiet shop. "Emily was 28 when she died. Fell down the stairs, they said. Broke her neck. Such a terrible accident. Emily married Robert in the spring of 1882. She died in November 1883. 18 months of hell." She wrapped the ribbon in brown paper, her movements precise. "Her husband was devastated, of course. Moved away 6 months later. Sold his businesses to Samuel Hartwell for a fraction of their worth. People said he could not bear to stay in a town with so many memories." Martha tied the package with string and set it on the counter. She looked directly at Rose. "But Emily did not fall, Rose. My daughter jumped. She left me a letter hidden in her sewing basket where her husband would not find it. She wrote about the beatings, the control, the way he isolated her from everyone who loved her. She wrote that she could not live one more day as his possession. So she chose the stairs. She chose a quick death over a slow one." Rose's throat closed. She could not breathe, could not speak. Martha continued, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I tried to tell people. I showed them the letter. But Emily's husband had money connections. The sheriff was his friend. They took the letter, said it proved nothing, said Emily was unstable, melancholic. They burned it in front of me. And then they warned me to stop spreading lies, or I would face consequences." "Why are you telling me this?" Rose whispered. Because I see the same look in your eyes that I saw in Emily's. The look of a woman who is calculating how much pain she can endure before it breaks something essential. And I am telling you that there is another way. A harder way, but a living way. Martha reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small leather journal similar to the one Rose had bought at the general store, but older, more worn. Emily started this 2 months before she died. She documented everything, dates, injuries, witnesses. I found it after she was gone, hidden where he never thought to look. It was too late to save my daughter, but it taught me something. Evidence matters. Truth matters. Even when people refuse to see it, even when they burn it, the truth remains. She pushed the journal across the counter toward Rose. Do not make Emily's mistake. Do not give up. Document everything. Every bruise, every threat, every moment of cruelty. Build your case. And when the time comes, when you are ready, there are people who will listen. Not everyone in this town is blind. Rose took the journal with trembling hands. The leather was soft with age, the pages yellowed. She opened to the first entry and saw Emily's handwriting neat and careful despite the terrible words. March 3rd, 1883. Robert struck me today for burning his breakfast. Left hand across my face, swelling above left eye. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house saw me afterward and asked if I was well. I said I tripped. She did not believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But what could she do? Rose closed the journal quickly, her eyes burning. I cannot take this. You already have. Hide it well. Read it when you need courage. And Rose. Martha reached across the counter and gripped Rose's hand. The stranger who came to town, Caleb Stone. He is not what he appears. Rose's heart stuttered. What do you mean? He came into my shop yesterday, said he needed fabric for a shirt, but he was not interested in the fabric. He was interested in information. He asked about the mine accident earlier this year, the collapse of shaft number 4. It happened in June. Asked if I knew the men who died. Asked if there had been any investigation. Why would he ask about that? Martha's grip tightened. Because one of the men who died was named James Stone, Caleb's younger brother, and Caleb does not believe it was an accident. The pieces began to fall into place in Rose's mind. The way Caleb had looked at her in the general store, not with desire but with recognition. He had seen abuse before. He knew what it looked like, and he was here looking for something, looking for truth about his brother's death. What does this have to do with Samuel? Rose asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Samuel owned the timber company that supplied the support beams for shaft number 4. After the collapse there were questions, whispers that the beams were green pine sold as seasoned oak, that Samuel had pocketed the difference and 4 men had died because of it. But the investigation was brief, superficial. The mine inspector ruled it an accident. The families were paid a settlement. The matter was closed. But Caleb does not accept that. Would you if it were your brother? Rose looked down at Emily's journal, at the careful documentation of pain, at the evidence no one had believed. Samuel knows Caleb is here, Rose said. Mrs. Kohler told me Samuel makes it his business to know about everyone. Then Samuel knows Caleb is dangerous, not because he carries a gun, but because he asks questions. And men like Samuel cannot afford questions. Rose wrapped Emily's journal carefully and tucked it into her shopping basket alongside the blue ribbon. Her mind was spinning connections forming. If Samuel had sold faulty timber that killed 4 men, if he had covered it up with bribes and false investigations, then he was not just a man who beat his wife. He was a murderer. And murderers did not stop at one crime when their empire was threatened. Martha, if Samuel knows Caleb is investigating, then Caleb is in danger. Yes, Martha's voice was grim, which is why I am telling you this. Because if Samuel decides to silence Caleb the way he silenced the questions about the mine collapse, you will be caught in the middle, and you need to decide right now whose side you are on. Rose met Martha's eyes. In them she saw grief and rage and a desperate hope that this time, maybe this time, the ending could be different. I need to warn him, Rose said. No, you need to be smart. If you approach Caleb directly, Samuel will know. He has eyes everywhere. Mrs. Patterson is not the only one reporting your movements. Half this town owes Samuel money or favors. They will tell him everything." "Then what do I do?" Martha pulled a scrap of paper from beneath the counter and wrote quickly. "Caleb takes his evening meal at the hotel dining room, 7 o'clock each night. He sits at the table by the window facing the street. Tomorrow night walk past that window, slowly. Carry this." She handed Rose a blue handkerchief with white embroidery at the corners. "If he sees a woman carrying this handkerchief walk past twice, he will know it is a signal. He will find a way to make contact safely." "How do you know this?" "Because I have been trying to find a way to reach him myself. But an old woman walking past a hotel window twice draws attention. A young woman taking an evening stroll does not." Rose took the handkerchief and the scrap of paper. On it Martha had written a single line. "Your brother did not die by accident. Follow the money." "If Samuel catches me," Rose began, "then you will face the consequences," Martha said bluntly. "But if you do nothing, if you let Caleb walk into whatever trap Samuel is planning, then you are complicit. You become part of the machine that kills. Is that the woman you want to be?" Rose thought about her father, about the choice he had made when faced with exposure. He had chosen the rope rather than face judgment. He had chosen cowardice. She thought about Emily, who had chosen the stairs, who had decided that death was preferable to one more day of captivity. She looked down at the journal in her basket, at the evidence Emily had compiled too late, at the truth that had died with her. "No," Rose said quietly. "That is not the woman I want to be." Martha nodded, satisfied. "Then tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Walk slowly. Let him see the handkerchief. Then go home and wait. Caleb will know what to do." Rose left the shop with her basket heavier than when she had entered. She walked home through the afternoon heat, her mind rehearsing the plan, looking for flaws, preparing excuses. An evening stroll was within the bounds of Samuel's rules, as long as she stayed on their street, as long as she did not speak to anyone. The hotel was 2 blocks from Hartwell House. She could walk that far past the window twice, return home before Samuel even knew she had left. It was possible. Dangerous, but possible. When Samuel came home that evening, he was in one of his expansive moods. He had closed a business deal, sold shares in a new mining venture to investors from Denver. He smiled at Rose across the dinner table, poured her wine, asked about her day. She told him about the ribbon, about the mending. She did not mention Martha. She certainly did not mention Emily's journal, now hidden in her sewing basket beneath layers of thread and fabric. That night Samuel was almost gentle. Afterward, lying in the dark beside her sleeping husband, Rose thought about tomorrow, about the handkerchief, about Caleb Stone, who had come to Silver Creek looking for the truth about his brother's death, about the mine collapse and faulty timber and 4 men who had died so Samuel Hartwell could pocket a few extra dollars. She thought about Martha's question, "Whose side are you on?" And she thought about her own hands, about the journal she was filling with evidence, about the choice before her. She could stay silent, safe, accept her cage and the bruises that came with it, watch Samuel destroy anyone who threatened him, and tell herself it was not her responsibility. Or she could fight, carefully, strategically, with the only weapon she had, words and documentation, and the desperate hope that somewhere someone would believe her when she finally spoke. Rose's fingers found the tender spot on her ribs where Samuel had gripped her 2 nights ago. The bruise was fading. They always faded. But the record remained written in ink that would not wash away. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. A blue handkerchief with white embroidery, a signal in the dark to a stranger who was searching for the same thing she was. Truth. Rose closed her eyes and began to count. Not sheep, but steps. The number of paces from Hartwell House to the hotel window. The seconds it would take to walk past twice. The heartbeats between safety and discovery. She counted until sleep came fitful and shallow, full of dreams where she ran and ran, but her feet moved through mud, and behind her, Samuel's voice called her name like a summons to judgment. She woke before dawn, her decision made. Tonight she would walk past that window. Tonight she would choose whose side she was on, and whatever came after, whatever price Samuel demanded, she would pay it, because the alternative was to become her father, to choose the easy death over the hard life. And Rose had already decided. She would not be her father. She would be something else entirely. Something Samuel Hartwell did not see coming. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Rose moved through her routines like an automaton, her mind fixed on the evening ahead. She mended a tablecloth that did not need mending. She reorganized the linen closet that Mrs. Kohler had already organized perfectly. She made notes in her journal about the previous night, carefully coded entries that would mean nothing to anyone who did not have the cipher key locked in her memory. Samuel came home at 4, earlier than usual. He found Rose in the parlor, embroidery hoop in hand, working a pattern of roses onto a handkerchief that was not the blue one hidden upstairs. "You look industrious," he observed, pouring himself whiskey from the crystal decanter. "I am trying to be useful." Trying. He savored the word like the whiskey. An interesting choice of verb. It suggests effort without success. Are you not succeeding in being useful, Rose? The question was a trap. She could feel the edges of it sharp and waiting. "I hope I am succeeding, Samuel, but I defer to your judgment on such matters." The answer pleased him. She saw it in the slight relaxation of his shoulders, the way he settled into his chair rather than prowling the room. She had learned his language, submission disguised as deference, surrender framed as respect. "I have been thinking," Samuel said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "We should host a dinner party, nothing elaborate, just a few of the town's more prominent citizens, the mayor perhaps, the mine superintendent, a few of my business partners. It is time my wife was properly introduced to Silver Creek society." Rose kept her needle moving through the fabric, steady and calm. "That sounds lovely. When were you thinking?" "Saturday next. That gives you 10 days to prepare. Mrs. Kohler will help with the menu, but I want you to oversee the arrangements. The flowers, the table settings, the seating chart. This is your opportunity to prove yourself capable." Another test. Everything with Samuel was a test. "I will do my best to make you proud." "You will do more than your best," Samuel corrected softly. "You will be perfect, because anything less than perfection reflects poorly on me. And I do not tolerate being made to look foolish, not by business associates, not by miners who complain about wages, and certainly not by a wife who fails to meet expectations." He finished his whiskey and stood. "I am returning to the saloon for the evening. There is a poker game with some Denver investors. I will be late. Do not wait up." Rose's heart accelerated. This was the opening she needed. Samuel gone for the evening. Hours of freedom. "Of course. I hope your game is profitable." Samuel crossed to her chair and tilted her chin up with one finger. His eyes searched her face, looking for something. Deception, perhaps. Evidence of thoughts she should not be thinking. "What will you do with your evening?" he asked. Rose met his gaze without flinching. "Finish this handkerchief. Perhaps read. It has been a warm day. I might take a brief walk in the garden before dark." The garden, not the street. "The garden," she confirmed. Samuel studied her a moment longer, then released her chin. "I am trusting you, Rose. Do not abuse that trust." He left. Rose heard the front door close, the sound of his footsteps on the porch, the creak of the gate. She counted to 100 before she moved. Then she set aside her embroidery and went upstairs. The blue handkerchief was where she had hidden it, tucked inside Emily's journal, both wrapped in a petticoat at the bottom of her wardrobe. Rose pulled them out with shaking hands. She read 3 entries from Emily's journal, drawing strength from the careful documentation, the refusal to let truth be buried. May 17th, 1883. "Robert broke my wrist today. Said I was clumsy, dropped his pocket watch. Doctor set the bone and said nothing about the bruises on my arms. I see the same doctor every month now. He always says nothing." The handwriting grew shakier as the entries progressed. The final entry, dated 3 days before Emily died, consisted of only one line. "I cannot do this anymore. Forgive me, Mama." Rose closed the journal carefully and wrapped it back in the petticoat. She tucked the blue handkerchief into her sleeve and checked her appearance in the mirror. Simple day dress hair pinned neatly, no jewelry. A woman taking an evening constitutional. Nothing suspicious. She waited until 6:30. The sun was lowering but still well above the mountains. Plenty of light remained. Rose told Mrs. Kohler she was stepping out for air, that she would be back before dark. The older woman's expression flickered with something that might have been concern, but she said nothing. She never said anything. Rose stepped into the street. The evening air was cooler than the day had been pleasant against her skin. She forced herself to walk slowly, casually, like a woman with no purpose beyond stretching her legs. Past the Hendersons' house with its yellow roses climbing the fence. Past the Morrisons' place where their dog slept on the porch. 1 block. 2. The Silverwood Hotel sat on the corner of Main Street and Pine. 3 stories of whitewashed wood, a wide porch with rocking chairs, windows that glowed warm in the evening light. The dining room occupied the front corner of the first floor, its large windows offering a view of the street. Rose approached from the side, her hand in her pocket, fingers closed around the blue handkerchief. She could see into the dining room now. Several tables were occupied, an elderly couple eating in silence, a family with 2 small children, and at the table by the window, exactly as Martha had said, sat Caleb Stone. He was reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee at his elbow, his hat hung on the back of his chair. He wore a clean shirt, no vest, suspenders visible. He looked like any other man taking his supper alone. But Rose saw the way his eyes moved over the paper without really reading the way his posture suggested coiled awareness rather than relaxation. He was watching the street, waiting. Rose walked past the window. Slowly. She pulled the handkerchief from her pocket as if to dab her face, making sure the blue fabric with its white embroidery caught the light. She did not look directly at Caleb, did not acknowledge him. She simply walked past the handkerchief visible in her hand. At the end of the block she turned and walked back. This time Caleb's eyes lifted from the newspaper. For a fraction of a second their gazes met through the window glass. Rose saw recognition flash across his face, saw his almost imperceptible nod. The signal was received. Rose tucked the handkerchief away and continued walking, her heart hammering so hard she thought surely everyone on the street must hear it. She turned onto Pine Street, heading back toward Hartwell House. She had done it. She had made contact. Now she just had to wait for Caleb to find a way to respond. She was 3 houses from home when she saw Mrs. Patterson standing in her garden watering flowers with a tin can. The woman looked up as Rose approached and smiled a thin, calculating smile. "Good evening, Mrs. Hartwell. Out for a stroll." Rose's blood turned cold. Mrs. Patterson, the woman who had reported her presence in the general store. Samuel's eyes in the neighborhood. "Yes, the evening is pleasant." "Indeed it is. I saw you walk past twice just now, once toward town, once back, almost as if you were looking for something." The words were casual, but the implication was clear. Mrs. Patterson had been watching, had seen Rose walk past the hotel, would report it to Samuel. Rose made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. Attack was sometimes the best defense. "I was looking for my husband, actually," Rose said, allowing a note of concern to enter her voice. "He mentioned he might stop at the hotel before his card game, but I did not see him there, so I returned home. I worry when he is out late. You understand, I am sure." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted. A wife concerned for her husband's whereabouts was expected proper. Nothing suspicious in that. "Of course, dear. We all worry. Though I should mention I saw Mr. Hartwell head toward the saloon an hour ago. I am sure he is quite safe." "Thank you. That eases my mind." Rose continued home, fighting the urge to run. She had covered her tracks, but barely. If Mrs. T. Patterson mentioned this to Samuel, if he questioned the story, if he checked whether Rose had actually inquired after him at the hotel, the lie would unravel. She would have to hope her performance had been convincing enough. Back at Hartwell House, Rose found Mrs. Kohler in the kitchen preparing a light supper. The older woman looked up as Rose entered, her eyes sharp. "You were gone 20 minutes, Mrs. Kohler said. "Not long enough to cause suspicion, but long enough to accomplish something. I hope whatever you did was worth the risk." Rose met her gaze. I hope so too. She ate the supper Mrs. Kohler prepared, though she tasted nothing. She sat in the parlor and finished the handkerchief embroidery, each stitch a meditation on patience. She waited. At 10 o'clock she went upstairs to bed. Samuel had not returned. The house settled into silence around her, creaking and breathing like a living thing. Rose lay in the dark, her mind racing. How would Caleb make contact? What if Mrs. Patterson's report reached Samuel before Caleb could act? What if this entire plan was foolish, dangerous, destined to fail? She must have dozed eventually because she woke to the sound of something tapping against the bedroom window. Soft, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. Rose sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. The tapping came again. Not random, deliberate. She slipped from the bed and crept to the window. The curtains were drawn, but she pulled them aside carefully, just enough to see out. Below, standing in the shadows of the garden, was Caleb Stone. He stood perfectly still, a small pebble in his hand. When he saw her face appear at the window, he held up the pebble, then pointed toward the back of the house. The meaning was clear. Meet me at the back door. Rose's mouth went dry. This was madness. If Samuel came home and found her sneaking out to meet another man, there would be no explanation convincing enough to save her. The punishment would be severe beyond imagining. But if she did nothing, if she let this chance pass, Caleb might walk into danger with no warning. 4 men had already died because of Samuel's greed and secrets. How many more would die if no one spoke? Rose pulled on a dressing gown over her nightdress and moved through the dark house with practiced silence. She knew which floorboards creaked, which door hinges needed oil. She had learned the geography of her prison well. The back door opened onto a small porch that overlooked the garden. Rose stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. The night air raised goosebumps on her arms. She could see Caleb's silhouette near the rose bushes, waiting. She descended the porch steps and crossed the lawn to where he stood. Up close in the darkness, she could see the tension in his jaw, the careful way he positioned himself to watch both her and the street beyond the garden. You took a risk walking past that window, Caleb said quietly. His voice was low, rough, a voice used to giving orders and being obeyed. If your husband saw you, if anyone reported it. Someone probably did, Rose whispered. Mrs. Patterson watches everything. I told her I was looking for Samuel. I do not know if she believed me. Caleb's expression tightened. Then we need to make this quick. Martha Brennan gave you a message for me. About my brother. Yes. She said James did not die by accident. She said to follow the money. I have been following the money. It leads to your husband. Samuel supplied the timber for shaft number 4, green pine sold as seasoned oak. The beams could not support the weight. 4 men died when the roof collapsed. My brother James wrote to me 2 weeks before the accident. He said the new timbers looked wrong, smelled wrong. He said he was going to report it to the mine superintendent. Rose felt ice settle in her stomach. And then the collapse happened. The investigation was brief. The mine inspector ruled it an accident. No one questioned the timber quality. The families received a small settlement. The matter was closed. Caleb's hands clenched at his sides. But it was not an accident. Samuel sold faulty materials and 4 men died. And I think the investigation was buried because Samuel paid people to bury it. The sheriff, Rose said, pieces falling into place. Sheriff Clayton. He and Samuel are close. Too close. That is what I suspect. But suspicion is not proof. I need evidence. Documents, ledgers, anything that shows Samuel's timber company supplied substandard materials. Anything that proves he knew the beams were faulty. Rose thought about the household accounts. She had been studying the coded entries in Samuel's private ledger. She thought about the locked drawer in his study, the papers he kept hidden even from her. Samuel keeps records, she said slowly. Everything is documented. He is meticulous about finances. If there is evidence, it will be in his study. But I cannot access his private papers. He would know immediately if anything was disturbed. Can you get me into the house late at night when he is asleep? No. He locks the doors. He is a light sleeper. And if he found you here, he would kill you, not arrest you, kill you. Samuel does not call the law when someone threatens him. He handles problems himself. Caleb nodded grimly as if this confirmed something he already knew. Then you will have to be my eyes inside that house. If you can find documents, invoices, anything related to the mine contract, copy them. Bring the information to Martha. She will get it to me. If he catches me searching his study, I will be the one who dies. I know. Caleb looked at her fully for the first time, his pale eyes catching what little moonlight penetrated the clouds. Martha told me about you, about your situation. I'm not asking you to do this for me. I am asking if you want to do it for yourself. Because if we can prove Samuel committed fraud that killed 4 men, if we can prove he bribed officials to cover it up, then he goes to prison. And you go free. The word hung between them. Free. Rose had not dared to think that word, to hope for it. Freedom seemed like something that belonged to other people, in other lives. Not to a woman sold by her father, married to a monster, beaten and controlled and slowly erased. But Caleb was offering her a path, dangerous, uncertain, possibly fatal, but a path nonetheless. I will look, Rose said. I cannot promise I will find anything. Samuel is careful, but I will look. That is all I ask. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. This is the date of the mine collapse. If you find invoices or contracts related to timber delivery around that time, those are what we need. Anything showing Samuel's company was involved. Rose took the paper, tucking it into her dressing gown pocket. How will I get information to you? I cannot walk past the hotel every night. Someone will notice. Martha will be the intermediary. Once a week you go to her shop for ribbon or thread, something normal. You pass documents to her hidden in fabric purchases. She passes them to me. No direct contact between us after tonight. And if Samuel discovers what I am doing— Caleb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of old grief and older guilt. 8 years ago, I was a Texas Ranger. My partner, a man I considered my brother, had a wife named Mary. I saw the bruises. I heard her cry through the walls of the boarding house where we all stayed. I said nothing. I told myself it was not my business, not my place to interfere between a man and his wife. One morning Mary hanged herself in the barn. I found her body. Rose could hear the self-loathing in his voice, the wound that had never healed. I swore that day I would never walk past it again. Caleb continued, never see a woman in danger, and tell myself it was not my concern. So I am not going to lie to you, Rose. If Samuel discovers what you are doing, I cannot protect you. I cannot stop what he will do. All I can promise is that if you help me bring him down, if we gather enough evidence to see him prosecuted, you will survive this, and he will not. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to Rose since she arrived in Silver Creek. No false promises, no empty reassurances, just the brutal truth of her situation and a slim chance of escaping it. I will search his study, Rose said, starting tomorrow night. Caleb nodded. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Be careful of Sheriff Clayton. He is not just Samuel's friend. I think he is Samuel's partner. Whatever Samuel is hiding, Clayton is helping him hide it. How can you be certain? Because I filed a formal request to review the mine accident investigation reports. I am family of a victim. I have legal right to see those records. Clayton refused, said the reports were destroyed in a fire last year. But the county clerk told me the fire was minor, confined to one storage room. Nothing from last year was damaged. Rose felt the pieces clicking together. Samuel and Clayton, business partners in crime, one supplying faulty materials, the other burying evidence, and between them 4 dead men and countless silenced questions. I should go back inside, Rose whispered. If Samuel comes home and finds me gone. Go. Be safe. And Rose— Caleb's voice stopped her. Thank you for taking this risk, for caring about men you never met. My brother James, he had a wife, 2 children. They deserve to know the truth about what happened to him. You are giving them that chance. Rose nodded, not trusting her voice. She turned and hurried back to the house, slipping inside and locking the door behind her. Her hands were shaking. Her legs felt weak. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something fierce and determined. Purpose. She had spent weeks documenting her own abuse, building a record of Samuel's cruelty. Now she had a larger mission. Proof that could destroy him completely. Evidence that would send him to prison not just for beating his wife, but for killing 4 men and covering it up. Rose climbed the stairs to the bedroom and slipped beneath the covers. She retrieved Emily's journal from its hiding place and opened to a blank page. In the darkness, she wrote by memory, her hand steady despite everything. July 15, 1887. Made contact with Caleb Stone. His brother James died in mine collapse shaft 4. Caleb suspects Samuel supplied faulty timber. Suspects sheriff involved in cover-up. I have agreed to search for evidence. Tomorrow night I begin. She closed the journal and returned it to its hiding place. Then she lay in the dark, counting her heartbeats, waiting for Samuel's return. He came home at midnight, stumbling drunk. Rose feigned sleep as he collapsed into bed beside her, reeking of whiskey and cigar smoke. He was asleep within minutes, snoring heavily. Rose stared at the ceiling and made plans. Tomorrow night, while Samuel slept off another evening of drinking, she would search his study. She would find the evidence. She would help bring down the man who had killed Caleb's brother, who had killed Emily, who had tried to kill the woman Rose might have been. And when it was done, when Samuel stood before a judge and answered for his crimes, Rose would finally be free. The word echoed in her mind like a prayer. Free. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rose moved through her routines with mechanical precision, her mind fixed on the night ahead. Samuel was in a foul mood, snapping at Mrs. Kohler over breakfast, criticizing the way Rose had arranged flowers in the parlor, finding fault with everything and nothing. By afternoon his temper had curdled into something darker. I had an interesting conversation with Mrs. Patterson this morning, Samuel said over lunch, his voice deceptively casual. Rose's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully, her face composed. Oh. She mentioned seeing you walking on Main Street last evening, past the hotel, twice. Yes. I told her I was looking for you. I thought you might have stopped there before your card game. Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying her with those cold gray eyes. And why would you think that I specifically told you I was going directly to the saloon? Rose had prepared for this. She had rehearsed her answer a dozen times in her mind. You did. But when 7 o'clock came and you had not returned, I became concerned. I thought perhaps something had delayed you, that you might have stopped at the hotel to meet with an associate. I only wanted to ensure you were well. How touching. My wife concerned for my welfare. Samuel's tone made it clear he did not believe a word. And yet, when you did not find me at the hotel, you did not continue to the saloon to inquire after me there. You simply returned home. I did not think it appropriate to enter the saloon. A woman alone in such a place would cause talk. But a woman walking past a hotel window twice does not cause talk. Rose met his gaze steadily. I am sorry if my actions concerned you, Samuel. I was worried. Perhaps I should have simply waited at home as you instructed. The apology was the right move. She saw Samuel's posture ease slightly, his need for control satisfied by her submission. Yes, you should have waited. In the future, Rose, you will trust that I can take care of myself. You will not go looking for me. You will not walk about town without explicit permission. Is that understood? Yes, Samuel. Good. He stood adjusting his vest. I am returning to the saloon. I will be late again tonight. The Denver investors require additional entertainment. Do not wait up. Relief flooded through Rose, though she was careful not to show it. Another night of Samuel absent, another opportunity to search his study. After he left, Rose went upstairs and retrieved Emily's journal. She read several entries drawing courage from the dead woman's words. Emily had tried to document her abuse, had tried to build a case, but she had given up too soon, chosen death over the long fight. Rose would not make that mistake. At 9 o'clock, when the house had settled into silence and Mrs. Kohler had retired to her rooms on the third floor, Rose lit a single candle and made her way to Samuel's study. The door was unlocked. Samuel had no reason to lock it. No one dared enter his private sanctum without permission. Until now. The study smelled of tobacco and old leather. Samuel's desk dominated the room, a massive walnut piece with numerous drawers and cubby holes. Rose set the candle on the corner of the desk and began her search, methodically starting with the unlocked drawers. Bills of lading, receipts from the saloon, correspondence with business associates in Denver and San Francisco. Nothing related to the mine. Nothing about timber. The bottom right drawer was locked. Rose examined the lock carefully. It was old simple. She retrieved a hairpin from her pocket, bent it straight and worked the tip into the lock mechanism the way she had learned to pick the lock on her father's desk when she was a girl, curious about the papers he kept hidden. The lock clicked open. Inside the drawer was a leather portfolio tied with string. Rose's hands trembled as she untied the knot and opened the folder. The first document was a contract dated October 1886, 8 months before the mine collapse. Contract for timber supply between Hartwell Lumber Company and Silver Creek Mining Corporation. Rose scanned the terms. Seasoned white oak support beams, 40 units per month. Price $16 per unit. She did the mathematics quickly in her head. $16 per unit for seasoned oak. But if Samuel had delivered green pine, instead he would have paid perhaps $4 per unit. $12 profit per beam. 40 beams per month. $480 monthly profit from fraud. Enough money to kill for. The second document made her blood run cold. It was a handwritten letter on mine company stationery dated 2 weeks before the collapse. The signature at the bottom read, James Stone. Mr. Hartwell, I am writing to inform you that the timber delivered last Tuesday appears to be green-cut pine rather than seasoned oak as specified in our contract. The beams smell of fresh sap and show signs of recent cutting. I have reported this discrepancy to Mine Superintendent Walker and requested he inspect the materials before installation. I trust this matter can be resolved quickly, as we cannot proceed with shaft expansion using substandard materials. The safety of the men working below depends on the integrity of these supports. Respectfully, James Stone, Shift Foreman. Rose read the letter 3 times, her heart pounding. This was it. Proof that James had identified the faulty timber, proof that he had reported it, and 2 weeks later shaft number 4 had collapsed, burying James and 3 other men under tons of rock. There was a third document, a telegram brief and damning. Walker, stop. Stone making trouble about timber. Stop. Handle it quietly. Stop. Will compensate usual amount. Stop. Hartwell, handle it. The same phrase Samuel used when ordering problems eliminated. Handle it quietly. And then James Stone had died. Rose's hands shook as she carefully copied the key passages from each document into her own small notebook, the one she kept hidden in her petticoat. She could not risk taking the originals. Samuel would notice immediately. But copies transcribed in her own hand would serve as evidence if corroborated by the originals later. She was replacing the portfolio in the locked drawer when she heard the front door open. Samuel. Home hours earlier than expected. Rose froze, her mind racing. She was in his study, the locked drawer, open documents spread across the desk. There was no innocent explanation for this. No lie convincing enough to save her. She heard Samuel's footsteps in the entrance hall, heavy and uneven. Drunk, but not incapacitated. She heard him speak to someone. Thank you for escorting me home, Sheriff. Damned Denver investors cannot hold their liquor. Game ended early when Morrison passed out face first into the pot. Sheriff Clayton's voice gruff and amused. Best way to win a hand, if you ask me. You cleaned them out good, Samuel. Indeed I did. Come in for a drink before you go. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. Samuel was bringing Clayton into the house. If they came to the study, if they found her here, both men would know what she had been searching for. And both men had already killed to protect their secrets. She blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. The desk was between her and the door. If she tried to leave now, she would be seen. The window behind the desk was too high, too narrow. There was only one hiding place, the heavy velvet curtains that flanked the window. Rose slipped behind the curtain on the left side, pressing herself flat against the wall, barely breathing. The fabric smelled of dust and tobacco. Through the gap where the curtain met the wall, she could see a sliver of the room. Light spilled in from the hallway as Samuel and Clayton entered. Samuel lit the lamp on his desk, and Rose saw with horror that she had not completely closed the locked drawer. It sat open, perhaps an inch visible to anyone who looked carefully. "What will you have?" Samuel asked, moving to the sideboard where he kept his better whiskey. "The Irish, if you are offering." Samuel poured 2 generous measures and handed one to Clayton. The sheriff settled into the leather chair facing the desk, stretching his legs out. He was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with a heavy jaw and cold eyes. He wore his badge pinned to his vest, even now, late at night, a reminder of authority, real or purchased. "I had a visit today from that stranger," Clayton said, swirling his whiskey. "Caleb Stone, the one asking questions about the mine collapse." Rose's breath caught. She pressed harder against the wall, willing herself invisible. "What did he want?" Samuel's voice was carefully neutral, but Rose heard the tension beneath. "Requested access to the investigation files. Said as family of a victim he has legal right to review the reports. I told him the files were destroyed in the storage fire last year." "And did he believe you?" Clayton snorted. "Does it matter? The files are gone, burned to ash in my own fireplace 3 months after the collapse. Nothing left to review." Samuel took a long drink. "He is persistent, I will give him that. Most drifters ask a few questions and move on when they get no answers, but Stone keeps digging. Maybe it is time to encourage him to stop digging." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning accidents happen. Man gets drunk, falls off his horse in the canyon, breaks his neck. Tragic, but no one's fault. Happens all the time out here." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Rose could see his profile in the lamplight, the handsome features that hid such ugliness. "Not yet," Samuel said finally. "Stone is ex-military, Texas Ranger according to my sources. Men like that do not disappear quietly. If something happens to him, people ask questions. Federal marshals get involved. We do not need that kind of attention." "So what do you propose?" "I propose we watch him, follow him, find out who he is talking to, what he knows. If he has evidence, we take it. If he has allies, we eliminate them. And only then, when we are certain there will be no consequences, do we handle Stone himself." Clayton nodded slowly. "Makes sense. I will put a couple men on him, discreet-like." "Good. And Clayton—" Samuel leaned forward. "If Stone approaches my wife, if he tries to use her to get to me, you will tell me immediately. Rose is naive. She might not understand that speaking to strangers can be dangerous. I would hate for her to find herself caught up in something unfortunate." The threat was clear. Samuel suspected Rose might be approached, might be turned, and if that happened, Rose herself would become a problem to be handled. Clayton finished his whiskey and stood. "I will keep an eye on things. But Samuel, this situation is getting complicated. 4 years ago we had one problem. We solved it. Now we have a Texas Ranger asking questions, a widow in town stirring up memories, and God knows who else might start wondering why the investigation was so brief. Maybe it is time to consider leaving Silver Creek. Take your money and start fresh somewhere else." "Leave?" Samuel's voice went hard. "I built this town. I turned Silver Creek from a dying mining camp into a profitable enterprise. I own half the businesses, hold debt on most of the rest. I am not running from some cowboy with questions about his dead brother. Pride is expensive, Samuel. Sometimes it costs more than you can afford to pay. Get out." Clayton shrugged and left. Rose heard the front door close. She waited, barely breathing, as Samuel sat at his desk, staring at nothing. He poured himself another whiskey, then another. The level in the bottle dropped steadily as the clock on the mantel ticked past midnight. Finally Samuel stood. He was unsteady now, truly drunk. He picked up the lamp and moved toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back. His eyes swept the room, and for one terrible moment Rose thought he was looking directly at her hiding place. But he was looking at the desk, at the drawer that sat open an inch. Samuel set down the lamp and crossed to the desk. He pulled the drawer fully open, checked the portfolio inside, counted the documents. Rose could see his lips moving as he verified everything was there. Satisfied, he closed and locked the drawer, pocketing the key. He picked up the lamp and left, closing the study door behind him. Rose stayed behind the curtain for another 10 minutes, listening to Samuel climb the stairs, hearing the bedroom door close above. Only then did she emerge from hiding, her legs cramped, her body shaking with reaction. She had been seconds from discovery, seconds from Samuel finding her with his private papers spread across his desk. The punishment would have been severe. Final, perhaps, but she had not been discovered. And she had the information Caleb needed. Rose slipped out of the study and up the stairs to her small room, the one Samuel had banished her to after the first month of marriage. She retrieved her hidden notebook and by candlelight transcribed the notes she had made into more detailed form. James Stone's letter about the faulty timber, the telegram to Superintendent Walker ordering him to handle the problem, the contract showing what Samuel should have delivered versus what he actually provided. It was enough to start building a case, not enough to convict on its own, but enough to establish motive and opportunity. If Caleb could find Walker, get him to testify about Samuel's instructions, corroborate the telegram, the case would grow stronger. Rose also added notes about the conversation she had overheard, Samuel and Clayton discussing Stone's investigation, the admission that investigation files had been deliberately destroyed, the threat against anyone who might help Caleb. She was writing the last line when she heard a sound in the hallway. Footsteps, uneven, stumbling. Samuel. Rose blew out the candle and shoved the notebook under her mattress. She pulled off her dressing gown and dove into bed, pulling the covers up, feigning sleep. The door opened. Samuel stood silhouetted in the doorway, lamp in hand. Rose kept her breathing deep and regular, her body still. She could feel him watching her, could feel the weight of his suspicion like a physical thing. "I know you are awake," Samuel said quietly. Rose did not move, did not respond. Samuel crossed the room and grabbed her shoulder, shaking hard enough to hurt. "I said I know you are awake." Rose opened her eyes, blinking as if coming out of deep sleep. "Samuel, what is wrong? What time is it? Where were you tonight?" "Here, sleeping. Where else would I be?" Samuel's hand moved to her throat, not squeezing, just resting there. A promise of what could happen. "I do not trust you," he said. His breath was sour with whiskey. "There is something different about you lately, something calculating behind your eyes. I see you watching me, studying me like you are waiting for something. I am your wife. Of course I watch you. I am trying to anticipate your needs, be a good wife." "Liar." His hand tightened fractionally. "You are planning something. I can feel it. You think you are clever hiding your thoughts, but I know women. I know how your minds work. You think if you wait long enough, if you are patient enough, you will find a way out. But there is no way out, Rose. Do you understand? The only way you leave this marriage is in a box in the ground." Rose forced herself to meet his eyes. "I am not planning anything, Samuel. I have nowhere to go, no one to help me. You have made certain of that." It was the truth in a way. The bleakness of her situation laid bare. Samuel studied her face a moment longer, then released her throat. "Remember that. Remember that you are alone, that no one in this town will help you, that I own everything and everyone, including you." He left, taking the lamp with him. Darkness flooded back into the room. Rose lay still for a long time, her throat aching where his fingers had pressed. But beneath the fear, beneath the revulsion, burned something fierce and unquenchable. Samuel was wrong. She was not alone anymore. Tomorrow she would find a way to get her notes to Martha, and Martha would pass them to Caleb, and slowly, carefully, piece by piece, they would build the case that would destroy Samuel Hartwell. Rose reached under the mattress and pulled out the notebook. She opened it to a fresh page and in the darkness wrote by memory one final entry. "Samuel knows something is different. He is watching me more carefully. Time is running short. I must move faster. Tomorrow I pass the information to Martha. Then I search for more evidence. Whatever documents Samuel has hidden, whatever secrets remain buried, I will find them. because the only way out is through, and I am not stopping until Samuel Hartwell faces justice for every crime he has committed." She closed the notebook and hid it again. Then she lay in the dark, her hand on her throat, counting the bruises Samuel had given her over the past 2 months. Counting the days until the circuit judge would arrive in Silver Creek for the quarterly court session. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to gather enough evidence to bury Samuel completely. 6 weeks to stay alive while doing it. Rose closed her eyes and began to plan. Rose woke to the sound of breaking glass. Downstairs, Samuel's voice rose in fury, followed by the crash of something heavy hitting a wall. Rose sat up, her heart pounding. Morning light filtered through the curtains. She had overslept, exhausted from the previous night's terror. She dressed quickly, her hands shaking as she pinned her hair. Whatever had set Samuel off this morning, she would bear the brunt of it. That was always how it worked. When she descended to the dining room, she found Samuel standing amid the wreckage of the breakfast service. Broken china littered the floor. Coffee soaked into the carpet. Mrs. Kohler stood frozen in the doorway to the kitchen, her face pale. "Good morning," Rose said carefully, keeping her voice neutral. Samuel turned. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot. He had not slept, she realized. He had drunk himself into a rage instead. "Do you know what I received this morning?" Samuel held up a telegram, the yellow paper crumpled in his fist. "A message from Superintendent Walker. He is returning to Silver Creek. Says he needs to discuss the mine contracts in person. Says there are questions about the timber deliveries from 4 years ago." Rose's blood turned to ice. Walker. The man Samuel had sent the telegram to. Handle it quietly. If Walker was returning, if he was asking questions now after 4 years of silence, something had changed. Caleb. Caleb must have found Walker, convinced him to talk. "I am sure it is nothing," Rose said. "Perhaps just routine business matters." "Nothing." Samuel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Walker has been in Denver for 3 years. He left Silver Creek the month after the mine collapse. We had an understanding, he and I. He took his payment and kept his mouth shut. And now he returns asking questions just as some Texas cowboy is stirring up trouble about his dead brother." Samuel crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Rose's arm, his fingers digging into the old bruises. "Tell me the truth. Has that man approached you? Has Caleb Stone spoken to you?" "No, I told you before. I have never spoken to him." It was technically true. She had not spoken to Caleb at the hotel window. Their only conversation had been in the garden at night, and Samuel knew nothing of that. Unless he did. Samuel's eyes searched her face, looking for the lie. "If I discover you have been keeping secrets from me, Rose, the consequences will be more severe than anything you can imagine. Do you understand?" "I understand." He released her arm and picked up the telegram again, reading it as if the words might change upon second viewing. "Walker arrives tomorrow. I need to know what he plans to say before he says it. I need to know if he can be bought again or if he has grown a conscience after all these years." Samuel crumpled the telegram and threw it into the fireplace. "I am going to the mine office. I need to review the old contracts, prepare my defense if Walker tries to implicate me in anything. You will stay in this house. You will speak to no one. Mrs. Kohler will ensure you do not leave. Is that clear?" "Yes, Samuel." He grabbed his coat and hat, pausing at the door. "The dinner party is still scheduled for Saturday. I will not allow Walker's inconvenient timing to disrupt my social obligations. You will continue preparations. Everything must be perfect. I will not have people questioning my stability." Then he was gone, the front door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. Rose looked at Mrs. Kohler. The older woman's face was carefully blank, but her hands trembled as she began picking up broken china. "Let me help," Rose said, kneeling to gather shards. "No." Mrs. Kohler's voice was sharp. "Go upstairs. Stay in your room. The less you are underfoot today, the better." But as Rose stood, Mrs. Kohler pressed something small and hard into her palm. Rose glanced down. A key. "The root cellar," Mrs. Kohler whispered. "There is a door in the back that leads to the alley. It has not been used in years, but it opens. If you need to leave the house without being seen, that is your way." Rose stared at the older woman. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I should have helped Emily. I saw what her husband was doing to her. I said nothing. I did nothing. And she died." Mrs. Kohler's voice cracked. "I will not stand by and watch it happen again. Whatever you are planning, child, do it quickly. Samuel is unraveling. And when men like him fall apart, they take everyone around them down as well." Rose closed her fingers around the key. "Thank you." She went upstairs to her room and retrieved the notebook from its hiding place. She added new entries about Samuel's reaction to Walker's telegram about his admission that Walker had been paid to stay silent. Then she wrapped the notebook in a scrap of fabric and tucked it into her bodice. She had to get this information to Martha. Today, before Walker arrived tomorrow. Caleb needed to know that Walker had been bribed, that Samuel was preparing to either buy his silence again or silence him permanently. Rose waited until she heard Mrs. Kohler retreat to the kitchen. Then she slipped down the back stairs through the narrow hallway that led to the root cellar. The key fit the old lock perfectly. The door opened with a creak that sounded deafening in the quiet house. The alley beyond was empty. Rose pulled her shawl over her head and stepped out, locking the door behind her. She moved quickly through the back ways of Silver Creek, avoiding Main Street, staying in the shadows between buildings. Martha's shop was closed, a sign in the window reading, "Back in 10 minutes." But the back door was unlocked. Rose slipped inside. Martha was in the storeroom unpacking a shipment of thread. She looked up as Rose entered and immediately set down the box she was holding. "You should not be here in daylight if anyone sees you." Samuel received a telegram. "Superintendent Walker is returning to Silver Creek. He wants to discuss the mine contracts. Samuel is terrified. He admitted Walker was paid to keep quiet about the timber." Martha's expression hardened. "So Caleb found him. Good. Samuel is going to try to buy Walker's silence again. Or worse. You need to warn Caleb. Walker is arriving tomorrow. If Samuel gets to him first, if he convinces him or threatens him or kills him, the only witness is gone." Martha nodded grimly. "I will get word to Caleb today." "Is there anything else?" Rose pulled the notebook from her bodice and handed it to Martha. "Everything I found in Samuel's study last night. James Stone's letter identifying the faulty timber. The telegram ordering Walker to handle the problem. Copies of the contracts showing what Samuel promised versus what he delivered. It is enough to establish fraud and motive. If Walker testifies that Samuel bribed him to falsify the investigation, it becomes murder." Martha took the notebook and flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she read. "This is more than I hoped for. Caleb will know what to do with it." "There is something else." Rose hesitated. "I overheard Samuel and Sheriff Clayton talking last night. Clayton admitted he destroyed the investigation files, burned them deliberately. He is as guilty as Samuel. They are both covering up 4 murders. The whole rotten system." Martha's hands clenched around the notebook. "Samuel buys the timber contract, delivers faulty materials. 4 men die. Samuel bribes Walker to call it an accident. Clayton destroys the evidence, and everyone profits except the widows and orphans left behind." "We need to move faster," Rose said. "Samuel is suspicious. He knows something is happening. He accused me directly this morning of keeping secrets. I denied it, but he is watching me constantly now. I do not know how much longer I can search for evidence without being caught." Martha went to a shelf and pulled down a bolt of dark blue fabric. She unrolled it carefully, revealing a space hollowed out in the center of the bolt. Inside was a small pistol, old but well maintained. "My husband's gun," Martha said. "He taught me to shoot before he died. I want you to take this." Rose stared at the weapon. "I cannot. If Samuel finds a gun in my possession, he will know I am planning something. If Samuel discovers what you have been doing, you will need a way to defend yourself. Take it. Hide it somewhere he will never look. And if he comes for you, if he raises his hand to strike you one more time, you put a bullet in him and you run. You come here, and I will hide you until Caleb can get you safely out of Silver Creek." Rose picked up the pistol. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her hand. She had never fired a gun in her life, but the weight of it felt like power, like choice. "I will hide it," Rose said, "but I will not use it unless there is no other option. There may come a moment when there is no other option. Be ready for that moment." Rose wrapped the gun in the fabric and tucked it into her basket. Martha gave her several spools of thread and a length of ribbon as cover items she could claim to have purchased if questioned. "Go now," Martha said. "And Rose, be careful. Samuel is dangerous enough when he is in control, but a desperate man is twice as deadly. He will lash out at anything he perceives as a threat. Right now, that includes you." Rose left through the back door and made her way home through the alleys. She slipped into the root cellar and locked the door behind her, climbing the stairs to the main house. Mrs. Kohler was in the dining room, having finally cleaned up the broken china. She glanced at Rose but said nothing. Rose went upstairs and hid the pistol in the bottom of her wardrobe, wrapped in a petticoat beneath her winter clothes. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and waited. Samuel came home at dusk. Rose heard him moving through the house, his footsteps heavy and angry. He did not call for her, did not come upstairs. She heard the study door close, the clink of glass as he poured whiskey. At 8 o'clock, Mrs. Kohler brought a tray to Rose's room, cold supper bread and cheese and apples. "Mr. Hartwell says you are to remain in your room this evening. He is working and does not wish to be disturbed." "Is he all right?" Mrs. Kohler's expression was grim. "He has been drinking since he returned. The whiskey bottle is half empty. Whatever business he attended to at the mine office, it did not go well." After Mrs. Kohler left, Rose ate sparingly. Her stomach was in knots, her mind racing. Walker would arrive tomorrow. Caleb now had her notes evidence of Samuel's fraud and bribery. The pieces were coming together, but the danger was escalating. She was contemplating whether to risk searching Samuel's study again when she heard a commotion downstairs. Raised voices, the front door banging open. Rose crept to her bedroom door and opened it a crack. Sheriff Clayton's voice echoed up the stairwell. "Samuel, we have a problem, a serious problem." "Not now, Clayton. I am in no mood for more problems." "You will want to hear this. I just received word from my deputy. Caleb Stone met with the territorial marshal in Helena 3 days ago, filed a formal complaint alleging fraud and murder. The marshal is opening an investigation." Silence. Then Samuel's voice, deadly quiet. "How do you know this?" "I have a source in Helena. Sends me telegrams when anything relevant to Silver Creek comes across the marshal's desk. Stone presented documentation. Copies of contracts, letters, financial records. Someone has been feeding him information from inside your house, Samuel." Rose's heart stopped. They knew. They knew someone was helping Caleb, and Samuel would immediately suspect her. "Search the house," Samuel said. "Now, search every room. I want to know what documents are missing, what information has been copied, and I want to know who took them." Footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets. Clayton had brought deputies with him. Rose closed her bedroom door silently and looked around in panic. The notebook was with Martha, thank God. But Emily's journal was still hidden in her wardrobe. The gun was in the same place. If they searched thoroughly, they would find both. She heard doors opening and closing down the hallway. They were searching the guest rooms first, working their way toward her. Rose moved quickly. She pulled Emily's journal from the wardrobe and shoved it inside her bodice. The gun she left where it was. Moving it now would be more suspicious than leaving it hidden. Her door opened without warning. Samuel stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. Behind him, Clayton and 2 deputies filled the hallway. "Out," Samuel ordered. "Into the hallway. Now." Rose obeyed, her heart hammering. Samuel gestured to the deputies. "Search everything. I want this room torn apart." They entered and began methodically going through her belongings, opening drawers, checking under the mattress, pulling clothes from the wardrobe. Rose stood in the hallway, Samuel's hand gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. She watched through the open door as the deputies searched. They found the gun within minutes. "Mr. Hartwell," one of them called, holding up the pistol, "found this in the bottom of the wardrobe." Samuel's face went white, then red. He dragged Rose back into the room, shoving her against the wall. "Where did you get that gun?" "I found it. In the attic. I was frightened. After hearing about the mine collapse, about the men who died, I thought perhaps I needed protection. Protection from whom? Samuel's voice was dangerously soft. I do not know. Just frightened. It was foolish. I am sorry. Samuel backhanded her across the face. The blow split her lip and sent her sprawling to the floor. Emily's journal shifted in her bodice, pressing against her ribs. Liar! You were planning to use that gun on me. You think I am stupid? You think I do not see what you are doing? He kicked her in the stomach. Rose curled into a ball, gasping, tasting blood. Search her, Samuel ordered the deputies. Check her pockets, her bodice everywhere. If she has been stealing documents, she will have them on her person. The deputies hesitated. Searching a woman's clothing was not something they were comfortable doing. I said search her. Samuel's voice cracked like a whip. One of the deputies, younger than the other, knelt beside Rose. Ma'am, I need you to empty your pockets. Rose's pockets were empty, but Emily's journal was pressed against her skin beneath her dress. Stand up, the deputy said, his face flushed with embarrassment. I need to check for concealed items. Rose stood slowly, her arms wrapped around her middle. The deputy patted down her sides, his touch professional but thorough. His hand paused when he felt the hard shape of the journal beneath her bodice. Mr. Hartwell, there is something. Get it. The deputy reached into Rose's dress and pulled out Emily's journal. Samuel snatched it from his hand and opened to the first page. His face changed as he read Emily's handwriting. The dates. The careful documentation of abuse at her husband's hands. Where did you get this? Samuel's voice was shaking now, not with anger, but with something worse. Fear. Rose said nothing. Samuel read further. His eyes widened as he reached the entries Rose had added. Her own record of beatings, her notes about Samuel's business dealings, the copied passages from his private papers. You have been spying on me. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. All this time playing the obedient wife, you have been documenting everything, building a case against me. He threw the journal into the fireplace. The old leather caught quickly, flames consuming Emily's final words and Rose's careful evidence. Who are you working with? Samuel grabbed Rose by the throat, lifting her until her toes barely touched the floor. Tell me, is it Caleb Stone? Is it Martha Brennan who has been helping you? Rose could not breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. Samuel, Clayton's voice cautious. You are killing her. Samuel released his grip slightly. Rose gasped for air, coughing. I worked alone, she choked out. No one helped me. Liar. Samuel shook her like a doll. The marshal has copies of my private documents. Contracts, telegrams, letters. How did Stone get those copies? How did he know where to look? Through her fading consciousness, Rose understood. The evidence she had passed to Martha that Martha had given to Caleb had already reached the territorial marshal. An investigation was opening. Whatever happened to her now, the machinery of justice had already begun turning. She smiled through the blood on her lips. You are finished, Samuel. Even if you kill me, you are finished. Samuel's hand tightened. Rose felt her vision darkening, felt herself slipping away. Then a voice from the doorway. Let her go, Hartwell. Right now. Caleb Stone stood in the doorway, a rifle leveled at Samuel's chest. Behind him, Martha Brennan held a shotgun, her face hard as granite. Samuel released Rose. She collapsed to the floor, gasping. You are trespassing, Clayton said, his hand moving toward his gun. Touch that weapon, and I will put a hole in you big enough to drive a wagon through, Martha said calmly. I may be old sheriff, but my aim is still good. Caleb kept the rifle trained on Samuel. The territorial marshal is on his way. He will be here by morning with federal deputies. Superintendent Walker has already given his testimony. He confirmed that Samuel Hartwell bribed him to falsify the mine investigation. He confirmed that 4 men died because Samuel sold faulty materials and covered it up with bribes and threats. Samuel's face twisted. This is not over. Yes, it is. Caleb's voice was hard, final. Your empire is burning, Hartwell, and you are going to watch it fall. Rose pulled herself to sitting, her throat aching. Through swollen eyes she looked at Samuel and saw him truly for the first time. Not as the powerful man who controlled the town, but as what he really was. A murderer. A coward. A man whose carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling because he had underestimated the courage of one frightened woman with a pen. Rose pulled herself to sitting, her throat aching. Through swollen eyes she looked at Samuel and saw him truly for the first time. Not as the powerful man who controlled the town, but as what he really was. A murderer. A coward. A man whose carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling because he had underestimated the courage of one frightened woman with a pen. The sound of boots on the front porch broke the standoff. Heavy measured official. The territorial marshal had arrived. 4 federal deputies entered the room, rifles at ready positions. Behind them came a man in his 50s wearing a silver star and a black coat. Marshal William Henderson. His eyes swept the room, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. Rose on the floor bleeding. Samuel backed against the wall. Clayton's hand still hovering near his gun. Caleb and Martha holding their weapons steady. "Sheriff Clayton," Henderson said, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. Deputy Marshal Evans disarmed the sheriff, gently. Clayton's face went white. "You have no jurisdiction here, Henderson. This is a local matter. Murder is a federal matter when it involves fraud against a mining corporation operating on federal land, and when the local sheriff is complicit in destroying evidence." Henderson nodded to his deputy. "His gun, now." Clayton's weapon was removed. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The sheriff, who had ruled Silver Creek through fear and corruption, was reduced to a criminal in seconds. Henderson turned to Samuel. "Samuel Hartwell, you are under arrest for fraud, bribery of a public official, conspiracy to commit murder, and 4 counts of negligent homicide in the deaths of William Pewitt, James Sotto, Thomas Harker, and James Stone." "You cannot prove any of that," Samuel said, but his voice shook. "Superintendent Walker gave a full confession 3 days ago, signed and witnessed. He detailed every bribe, every threat, every document you ordered him to falsify." Henderson pulled folded papers from his coat. "I also have testimony from Rose Hartwell, corroborated by documentation she provided through intermediaries, copies of your contracts, your telegram ordering Walker to handle the problem, a letter from James Stone identifying the faulty timber 2 weeks before the collapse." Samuel's eyes found Rose. The hatred in them was pure and terrible. "You did this. You destroyed everything." Rose met his gaze without flinching. Her voice, when it came, was steady, clear, the voice of a woman who had found her strength in the darkest place imaginable. "No, Samuel. You destroyed everything the moment you decided 4 men's lives were worth less than your profit. I simply made sure the truth survived." Deputy Evans moved to handcuff Samuel. The man who had controlled Silver Creek through wealth and violence fought like a cornered animal, lashing out screaming obscenities. It took 3 deputies to subdue him. "The circuit judge arrives in 2 weeks, Henderson said to Rose. "You will need to testify. Can you do that?" Rose touched her throat where Samuel's fingers had left marks. "I can do that." "Martha Brennan and Caleb Stone will also testify. With Walker's confession and your documentation, the case is strong. Both men will face justice." Caleb lowered his rifle finally. His eyes found Rose. "Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor?" "I need air." Rose stood slowly, every muscle protesting. "I need to walk out of this house on my own feet." Martha was beside her, immediately supporting her elbow. "Come, child. My home is yours tonight, and every night after until you decide where you want to be." As the deputies led Samuel and Clayton out in chains, Samuel turned back one last time. "You will regret this, Rose. Even from prison, I will find a way to make you pay." "No," Rose said quietly. "You won't, because I am not afraid of you anymore. And a man with nothing but threats is just a man with nothing." The deputies hauled him away. His shouts echoed down the street, fading into the Montana night. Mrs. Kohler appeared in the doorway, her face wet with tears. "Mrs. Hartwell, I should have helped you sooner. I should have spoken up. I am so sorry." "You helped when it mattered," Rose said. "The key to the root cellar. That was enough." 3 months later, Rose stood in a courtroom in Helena, her hand on a Bible, and told the truth. Every beating, every threat, every moment of terror. She described finding the documents in Samuel's study. She explained how she had copied them, hidden them, passed them to Martha Brennan, who gave them to Caleb Stone. The courtroom was packed. The widows of the dead miners sat in the front row, Mary Puit, Anasto Rebecca Harker, their children beside them. They had waited 4 years for this moment. Samuel's lawyer tried to discredit Rose, called her a disgruntled wife, suggested she had fabricated evidence out of spite. But when Walker testified confirming every detail of Rose's account, the defense crumbled. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Samuel Hartwell was sentenced to death by hanging. Sheriff Clayton received 20 years in territorial prison for obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. 6 months after that terrible night in Hartwell House, Rose stood in Martha's fabric shop, now half hers, by legal agreement. She wore a simple gray dress. Her hair was pinned loosely. No powder covered her face. No bruises needed hiding. The bell above the door chimed. Caleb entered, hat in hand, sawdust on his boots. "The new fence is finished," he said. "Replaced all the rotten posts. Should hold for years now." Rose smiled. It was a real smile, unforced, reaching her eyes for the first time in memory. "Thank you. I know Martha has been worrying about that fence since her husband died. She told me." Caleb stood awkwardly, shifting his weight. 6 months of working odd jobs around Silver Creek had tanned his face, lightened something in his eyes. "She also told me you are teaching women to document abuse, that 3 wives have come to you for help already." 4 now. Mrs. Chen came yesterday. Her husband is a mine foreman. She brought Bruises and a story I have heard before. Rose touched the small leather journal on the counter. "I gave her a blank book, showed her how to record everything. Dates, injuries, witnesses. Emily taught me that evidence matters. Even when people refuse to see it at first, the truth remains." Caleb nodded slowly. "My brother's children came to visit last week, from Denver. They wanted to see where their father died. I took them to the mine. We put flowers on the memorial the widows built. That must have been difficult." "It was necessary." He met her eyes. "They needed to know their father's death meant something, that justice was served. You gave them that, Rose. You gave all of us that. We gave each other that." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, just full. "I have been thinking," Caleb said carefully, "about staying in Silver Creek. Wilson offered me a permanent position managing his ranch. The pay is decent. The work is honest." "That sounds like a good offer." "It is, but I wanted to ask." He twisted his hat in his hands. "Would it bother you, me being in town after everything that happened, if you would prefer I move on? I understand." Rose looked at him, really looked. At the man who had ridden into Silver Creek looking for truth about his brother's death, who had seen her bruises and refused to look away, who had stood in her garden at midnight and offered her a chance at freedom without asking anything in return. "I would prefer you stay," she said quietly, "if that is what you want." "It is." "Then stay." The bell chimed again. Martha entered, arms full of fabric bolts. She looked between Rose and Caleb and smiled knowingly. "Caleb, if you are finished making calf eyes at my business partner, the porch steps need fixing. Rose, Mrs. Chen is returning this afternoon for the red thread. Make sure we have it ready." Caleb grinned, tipped his hat to Rose, and headed out back. Martha set down the fabric and studied Rose's face. "You look well, child. Genuinely well." "I feel well." Rose touched her throat reflexively, then caught herself. The gesture was habit now, checking for bruises that no longer appeared. "Is that strange? After everything." "It is healing. There is nothing strange about that." Martha squeezed her hand. "Emily would be proud of you, and grateful. You finished what she started. You proved that the truth, properly documented, properly preserved, can bring down even the most powerful men." Rose thought about Emily's journal, the one Samuel had burned. about the pages lost to flames. But Emily's story lived on in a different way now, in the legal precedent Rose's case had set, in the 3 women who had come to her for help, in the understanding that silence was not safety and documentation was not weakness. "I heard from the territorial governor's office yesterday," Rose said. "They are proposing new laws, requiring investigations into mining accidents, mandatory inspections of materials, criminal penalties for supplying substandard equipment. They are calling it the Hartwell Prevention Act." Martha's eyes widened. "They are naming it after Samuel, after what happened here, to prevent other Hartwells from killing workers for profit." Rose picked up the journal on the counter. "And they asked me to consult, to help train law enforcement on recognizing and documenting evidence in abuse cases. Will you do it?" "Yes, I think I will." That evening Rose locked the shop and walked home through Silver Creek. Not to Hartwell House, which had been seized by the territorial government and sold to pay restitution to the miners' families. Home was a small apartment above the fabric shop now. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a window overlooking Main Street. Simple, safe, hers. She passed the hotel where she had walked with the blue handkerchief, past the general store where she had first seen Caleb. The town looked different now, freer somehow, lighter, or perhaps she was the one who had changed. In her apartment, Rose lit a lamp and opened a new journal. This one was not for recording abuse. This one was for something different. She wrote the date at the top of the first page. Then she wrote a single sentence. "November 5th, 1887. My name is Rose Ashford Hartwell, and I am free." She set down the pen and looked out the window at Silver Creek, settling into twilight. Somewhere in the territorial prison, Samuel Hartwell sat in a cell awaiting execution. Sheriff Clayton sat in another cell, his badge and authority stripped away. And here she sat alive, whole, beginning again. Rose touched the journal's cover and thought about all the women who would come after her, the ones who would read about her case, who would learn that documentation could be a weapon, that patience could be power, that survival could become victory. She thought about Caleb fixing fences and rebuilding a life in the shadow of his brother's death, about Martha who had lost a daughter but gained a purpose, about the widows who finally had answers and justice. She thought about her father who had chosen the rope, and about Emily who had chosen the stairs, and about herself who had chosen the pen. The lamp burned steady in the window. Below, Silver Creek breathed and settled, and Rose Ashford Hartwell, survivor witness teacher, opened her journal to a fresh page and began to write her future in her own words with her own hand in ink that would not fade. Free.